Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Hyperlegible, a not boring radio production. Today I have the privilege of talking to Conrad Bastable about his epic essay, Forsaking Industrialism. He's been thinking about this essay and about what it takes to industrialize for months and just happened to hit publish in the midst of a loud and urgent tariff-driven conversation on the topic. I first came across Conrad's writing about 6 months ago when he wrote Monetization and Monopolies, which argued that monopolies can be pretty good, actually, backed by a bunch of arguments and anecdotes that had me nodding my head the whole time. This piece is similar. He takes a thoughtful, measured, evidence and history-based approach to what has become a charged topic that hasn't had maybe a lot of reasoning and rationality around it. We discuss why the EU's regulations have benefited China, how China was able to build up its electric platform, what it can do now that it has such a platform, and what it would take for the West to build an electrification platform of its own. Tariffs aren't bad, he argues, but they're certainly not enough. Now, this conversation is the longest that we've had in the history, the 6-episode history of Hyperlegible. So I'm going to let Conrad take it away and explain it to you as opposed to trying to describe more of it myself. But before we get there, I'd like to introduce our sponsor, Readwise. Hyperlegible is sponsored by my friends at Readwise, who build software that helps you get the most out of your reading. I've been using Readwise for years to support the newsletter, my general curiosity. I just kind of save anything that I'm reading that I know that I'm going to want to come back to. And now, this podcast. If you like listening to podcasts like Hyperlegible, you'll love their Reader app. It's like Pocket, but next generation, with best-in-class highlighting, annotating, AI, and more. It also supports not only web articles, but YouTube, newsletters, PDFs, EPUBs, and even X-Threads. If you want to give it a try, go to readwise.io/hyperlegible. That's readwise.io/hyperlegible, where you can set up a free account and get instant access to all of the essays that we discuss here on Hyperlegible. You'll find articles from Tina He, Atsav Memoria, Julian Lair, Alex Danko, Parakeet, and now you'll find Forsaking Industrialism by Conrad Bastable. Conrad, welcome to Hyperlegible. Can you summarize Forsaking Industrialism in like 2 minutes?
Yeah, I'll do my best. Maybe not. I think I basically wrote the essay trying to lay out a lens or a framework or a case, and it's long, but that the West, Europe, vis-a-vis America is like the undercurrent of the essay, but Europe in particular had the opportunity to be a industrial leader or a serious industrial player across the board in a lot of ways that it has sort of squandered through a combination of intentional hostility and unintentional apathy. And instead it's sort of ended up ceding much of its industrial platform to China and funded the rise of China, which we might sort of euphemistically call an unaligned geopolitical power these days, if you're in the West. And I do these deep dives. I look at electrification, the change from industrial, like internal combustion engines into electric vehicles, e-bikes, look at a couple of companies, talk about venture capital. We do a look on like IRR and how the sort of the nature of capital investment is like, makes it very hard to compete with private capital. And then kind of at the end, or maybe the undercurrent of the whole thing is I take issue with some of the sort of prevailing neoliberal, neoconservative orthodoxy around markets and trade. And I'm like, this is all wonderful, but sort of at T+1 or like T+10, you get a lot of domestic turmoil and political polarization. And ultimately, you're all going to end up with policies that are way worse for growth and productivity than you wanted anyway. And so maybe you should just try making stuff.
You did it. So we're going to dive into like a ton of details here. We joked before we hit the recording on this that like there's just no way we're going to get through this in an hour. So we'll see how long it goes. And I'm going to actually try to make you end on at least a little bit of an optimistic tone. We'll see. Is there anything that we can do? But before we get there, you don't write often, and then you drop these like deep, super well-reasoned, super well-researched pieces. The last one that you wrote is when I discovered you, Monetization and Monopolies. Like, what is your process? Because it's like nothing, and then like one of the best things I've read in a very long time.
I think so. One of the things I say somewhere on my little website is that I sort of commit to not publishing anything unless I feel like I have something to say, which is like wonderfully freeing. Like I think if I really had to put content out, I could probably do like one every other month, but I have a job and a family and I love these things. And like, I think I kind of commit to not putting things out. And the way that I write things, a friend of mine jokes, he's like always astounded. I can basically do like 3,000 to 6,000 words in a setting. So like the essays are like 6,000 to 12,000 words. So I can sit down and write, call it 4,000 or 5,000 words in one draft. But that only works if I already know like the rough shape of the argument, what I'm going to say, like the outlines or whatever. So usually in a week I'll have the essay done, but all the magic happened in like the 6 months that I wasn't publishing anything before then. And that's just like talking with friends. I mean, I know you read a lot, obviously, like I listen to podcasts. I just sort of continually consuming the hubbub of what's happening out there. And I'm kind of just always looking for where my worldview of my mental model kind of conflict with kind of prevailing things that I think smart people are saying. And once that like rubs enough, usually I'm like, oh, there's something I could write on this topic. And then there's still not enough to actually write the essay. Then I'll just wait for like a personally motivating hook that like makes me feel like actually subjectively emotionally invested in the thing, and then I'll sit down and write 5,000 words about how annoying it is. Like with the one you talked about, it was like some Google search thing was just going horrifically wrong on my phone because I couldn't read the news article because there was like 4 different pop-ups like back to back, and I was just like, what happened to the internet? And with this, there's sort of this similar story that happened. And once I have that, boom, I'll sit down. Within a couple of days, I'll have the first draft of it, and then it'll take maybe a month and a half of editing. Editing's always the hard part because you gotta make it sound consistent and coherent, and take the bits out and put the bits in, and go find little stories that support and little anecdotes, and then you find something you wrote was maybe a little wrong, so you change it, blah blah blah. But yeah, the process is very fun. Honestly, I do nothing for 6 months, and I just till I get annoyed by something, and then I write the essay.
I love the idea of kind of waiting for the hook. Do you have one idea for this? Did you have an idea that you were going to be writing something about industrialism and all of that, and then like you got the hook and you're ready to go, or are you waiting for like a general hook to come and kind of inspire you?
I try in the piece very hard not to talk. It's like the publication date was like an accident. I'd been saying for a week I was going to publish it, and then it was like this, like the day that tariffs got announced or something. It was like, oh wow, how convenient. But I'd been planning to write explicitly about the subtitle had come into my head, like tariffs are not enough or something like that was in my head from November for like obvious reasons. Like I knew this administration was going to try and do something. I'm like, I'd written about this in 2018, 2019, and 2020 in various like oblique ways. And so I was like, oh, I should write about this because I think nobody gets it right. Everyone's kind of wrong. Like that maybe the goals are admirable, the policies are wrong, or something like that, which is like the opposite of the sign that everyone else has on both of those things. And then I was just like, I even had like a first 2 paragraphs written out or 3 paragraphs written out in like November, but I was busy and I wasn't really working on it. And then I bought a dirt bike. I bought a KTM, which if you read the essay, there's like a whole case study on KTM. And I was riding the dirt bike in the fall with some friends, and that was a lot of fun. And then I couldn't ride over the winter because I live in New England and it was cold and frigid and snowy. And so I was looking at, okay, when it thaws in the spring, what can I buy to ride in my backyard so my neighbors don't shoot me? And I was like, oh, they have these e-bikes now that are like kind of like dirt bikes, but they don't make a lot of noise, so your neighbors don't get mad. And I was like, I've got 1 acre in the backyard. I'll like make some trails. It'll be great. So it's like, of course, it's like snowy. I'm stuck inside. It's like my kid's gone to bed. It's after dinner. I'm like just researching these e-bikes. And I'm listening to podcasts and I'm like finding stuff and I learn about the industry and I'm trying to find out stuff about the companies that make them, and you can't find anything out. And of course, in the back of my head, I have this essay that I want to write, and it's like, oh, there's these 3 brands, but actually they're all kind of like this weird shell corporate layer on the underlying factory. And actually, I listened to a podcast by this American company that's trying to make an American electric dirt bike, and the founder's like, yeah, you just go to China, you go to the factory, you go to the city that makes bikes, you find the factory there, they give you a brochure, you point out what you want, and they mix and match, and you order 1,000 of them and you sell them. Congrats, now you're an industrial producer. And he's like, we don't want to do this, right? And I'm like the dots are just connecting in my head, because I'm like, I want to write about tariffs, like here's this thing, all this stuff's going on, and then KTM goes bankrupt, and I'm like, I've got it. I've got it. This is the thread. This is the case study. This is what I'm going to write about.
You kind of just answered a question that I was going to ask, which is like how you come up with all of these sources that like are just in places that I never would have thought about looking. But I guess live an interesting life, and then you'll be looking for electric dirt bikes in the middle of the winter. Tell me about KTM. What happened there? What was the bankruptcy? What was the story?
I think there's like a story that will be written generally, which is like very common and very standard. And it'll basically just say like, oh, management's terrible. The CEOs are self-interested, greedy, whatever, terrible people. The management's terrible. I think that's like the normal story when these things happen. And to some degree, no offense, but it's probably true. Like your company doesn't go bankrupt unless you fail. And it's your job as the leader to make things work no matter what, right? But there are skill differences in these things, and so KTM is this company with like thousands of European employees and billions of revenue. They're like a leading manufacturer of dirt bikes, motorcycles of all kinds, and they're based in Austria. They're like a kind of a gem of the European manufacturing, and they've certainly come up over the last couple of decades from nothing. They've done a good job, but that's like the veneer story. It's like, okay, they've made some mistakes, something about overproduction. COVID happened. COVID was really good for people who make these kinds of things because we printed an ungodly amount of money and consumers got it all. Credit was low. People go buy dirt bikes, turns out. And KTM kept producing stuff. They didn't turn it down. When interest rates went up, interest rates go up. People stop buying cars and dirt bikes. And then they run out of money because they're making stuff they can't sell, right? That's like the kind of the veneer that's the normal story. But I think like the underbelly of the story is basically that the EU regulatory environment, the framework, everything top to bottom, just applies tremendous fixed costs to doing business there. And like you speak to anyone in any industry, this is like not even about industry. This is just true. Like this is functionally why Ireland's economy exists, which I've written about elsewhere. It's like just any way to route around some of the fixed costs is like massively beneficial. And if you're an industrial producer, like you make stuff and you have to sell it, right? You don't need like an MBA to figure out the unit economics of like you have fixed costs up here. How do you reduce those per unit? You need to make as much as possible. And so like what you see is like, as with almost everything the EU does, it's kind of optimized for like the status quo, the stasis. Like it's a great little thing so long as nothing changes and you're already a big player at scale. But it's very hard to get to scale because you get destroyed by these fixed costs along the way. And so KTM is they were trying to ride the COVID momentum into effectively reducing the impact of fixed costs on their business, get to scale as quick as possible. And, then there's like some sort of virtuous cycle of political impact on the thing, because once you're big enough, maybe then people start listening to you. Maybe then you can have some impact, and maybe then they don't make your stuff, illegal to produce, which is what happened with KTM. So they produced all these bikes, and then as they were going bankrupt, the 250,000 of bikes they hadn't sold were now illegal to sell. Like you can't sell them in Europe. So it's like you're trying to scale, you're trying to do all this stuff, and then like the people in Brussels are just like, yeah, by the way, like you can't sell this, And anyway, so I'm sure the company, these things they live and die again. It'll be reborn. It'll get born and saved and turned into whatever. The equity holders will get wiped. But just kind of a classic story of prioritization in my mind.
I guess there's like kind of a couple of things about the EU regulations that I want to talk about. One is that they just like almost in your essay, you kind of argue that they like just send a bunch of demand just like straight to China, straight out of the EU. So that's kind of one probably unintended consequence. The other is just as like EU regulations are the most stringent regulations is the thing that sets the pace for the rest of the market. And I would imagine then like pushes more demand into China. So how does that all work together?
The first thing on like sending demand out is basically like, okay, so you like, let's say something's changed. Like, let's say actually the thing that was selling in 1990 is no longer the thing you need to make $250,000 of a year, right? Well, who's been making these new technologies? Who's been doing this? And to the extent that player exists, they need to compete against the fixed cost regime that exists in Europe. So it's basically like guaranteed to not come from Europe, or like to the extent that anything changes, like so like 10, 20 years later, something changes, some new technologies like batteries, electric vehicles, right? Like there's no way the mining, the infrastructure, the underlying technologies, the network ecosystem of companies you would need to make that, which did exist in Europe like 100 years ago. That's where all these companies started. There's no way that's so basically the sort of regulatory framework, which is designed as, it's designed as some sort of protectionism. That's kind of why they do it partially, right? They like favoring their status quo big companies. But it means that when anything changes, it's guaranteed to come from outside of Europe. And so the capital goes out. You got to buy these cheap e-bikes from China. And like, maybe it's not the sexiest, most performant bike out there, but like, they're pretty good at making stuff these days, actually. Like, they make some good stuff at very large scale because, of course, you make millions of anything a year at scale and you make profit off it, you'll get better at it. And so, yeah, that's the demand going out. And then the intolerant wins thing, there's this, it's just like one of these little nuggets that Nassim Taleb said like years and years ago. And it's just like stuck in my mind because it's such an interesting counterintuitive framework of like the most intolerant wins. And it was about, like I talk about in the essay, it's about like how everything is kosher that you can buy, even the lemonade in the grocery store. The EU regulations basically just like they've pushed, especially in engines, automotive, transport, they pushed the whole market to sort of comply with them. They are the market, the global leader in regulatory frameworks. And this is like privacy, right? You go on a website, you got to click some pop-up, right? Like, thank you. And just and genuinely, maybe the answer is thank you, because maybe without the EU, all of our data would just be like horrifically exploited and sold by like Chinese and American tech companies. Like that, there is. I understand the spirit of maybe where they come from or how they defend these things. Yeah, maybe. But the reality of like doing this is that like somebody has to comply with the framework that you've built, and it is not going to be, for all the things we just talked about, it's not going to be a domestic producer. And so it's like you had this opportunity. That's what's so tragic about it, is like they had the opportunity to build. This is why I'm like they could have been industrial leaders in almost every sector, because everyone was going to comply with their things, with their regulations. All they had to do was encourage. Well, they had to do a lot of things actually, but if they'd been able to cultivate these firms domestically, it could have been a huge boon to Europe, and I suspect there would have been lots of positive knock-on effects. But instead, what's like the easiest way to do it? I mean, I have this like anecdote in the essay that's like maybe a little harsh and a little spicy about like, BMW, just they have 15 years to figure out how to get 5 million batteries a year in their cars, or they could just see declining revenues and profits and not make cars, right? Like they could just quit, which is like, okay, so what are they going to do? Who in Europe has been give them 5 million batteries a year?
One of the big questions, and I want to get to the BMW one because I love the way that you wrote it, but one of the big questions before we get there is like, how did China get this so right? Like, you talk about this idea of building kind of like this industrial platform that on electrification that they've been able to build kind of over years. What is that platform, and how did they get it so right?
I think there's a danger of like over hyping up your rivals to some degree. When someone else does something really great, you just want to be like, wow, like no one could compete with whatever sports team, right? Like, and I think maybe some of this is a little overdetermined. The perfect intro storyline to it would be like, yeah, so like a number of sort of upper middle class Chinese elites in like the 1920s, like whenever it was, I think it was the 20s. They realized China was screwed. There was lots of very bad things happening. They went over to Europe. They did these work study programs. Like Deng Xiaoping was in Renault making cars and in a steel mill with a bunch of other future Chinese CCP leaders. And like they're like, okay, this is industry. This provides jobs for the people. They'd like join the Revolutionary Party because it's like revolution or imperialism are basically options there. They go back to China. They win. They have their revolution. They go full steam ahead on the revolution thing, and it's like horrific. Like millions and millions of people die. It goes very bad. And so then you get the choice that like all executives have when things go that bad, which is like, okay, I can abdicate and go away, or I can kind of throw out all the ideology and just like pragmatism max, basically, right? Like, and there's this little expression about like, doesn't matter what color the cat is, it catches mice, right? And maybe this is a very, very bad way to realize the right idea, having millions of your own people die because you were like too addicted to ideology. But it is pretty good for having like at least 2 generations of leaders pretty committed to pragmatism and like having a sort of national somewhat unified spirit behind the idea that like, hey, if things get better, like that's like the number one thing actually, right? I don't know to like the extent to which that story is like really real or not, but I think it's a really good narrative, and it's like a nice little window dressing for like the reality, which is basically that like they ran the playbook that's like the only playbook that has ever been run by any country that's ever achieved like meaningful status with a population bigger than like 10 50 million people or something, right? Like every country has done the same playbook. It's just the ones that do it, then we just like we tell everyone else we're doing something else often in the West. But like the industrial playbook that China run was run by Japan and Korea around the same times to great success. It was run by Germany, it was run by England, it was run to some degree by France, it was run by America. Like this is the way that wealth has been created at scale for nations since the Industrial Revolution. It's like a combination of global markets and domestic production. It's like taking some of the good parts of mercantilism with the best parts of globalism. You fuse them together and you basically have in-house domestic production, and then that creates a lot of service labor on top, which is great. You got like your college graduates get labor, your like lower skilled labor gets jobs, everyone gets richer, the wealth then creates like capital cycles, and it's wonderful. It has lots of ways that it can go bump in the night, but there is basically no other way that any nation has achieved make our whole country rich at scale, right? Like if you're a little island nation, you can be like a trade port or something. But if you're China, like you can't be Singapore actually. Like Singapore is Singapore because China is China, but China can't be Singapore. They need at scale. They got like 1 billion people or something. I don't know how many it was 50 years ago, but what do you do? Like how do you raise GDP? Like when I was talking about China in like 2018, I remember someone was like, oh, but they're only, ranked like 75th or whatever it was on the GDP per capita like table on Wikipedia, right? And I always think those views are so interesting because now 7 years later, I checked recently, they're like 15 places higher up, right? And it's like that's a leaderboard, but it's not static. And the part of the goal of this thing is to change your position on the leaderboard. And there are like these moments of discontinuity where you can get pretty severe changes in trajectory happening.
You talk about the platform economy, like where they ended up now, where you kind of just like have the people who are able to do all of the things that you need to be able to like build whatever new thing you want to build now. What is the platform economy?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't even get to that. I got carried away. But that's the thing. So it's in the context of one firm, one company, within the borders of like a sort of platonic Western joint stock company. People really understand the benefits of vertical integration in the West. This is like, okay, we kind of get it, right? Like you can look at like the Andrew Carnegie to all the way to the Tesla. Like there's a lot of benefits. A platform, and I use these network effects. I use these analogies from social media because we've got two generations of Americans who've grown up seeing how you can build a platform like a Facebook, like a social network, and then you can build a lot of businesses on top of it, and that can create a lot more value than just the one company. In the same sense, a platform economy around electrification, industrial, it's the same kind of idea. Basically, you take the idea, okay, I need to make a lot of things. I want to make a lot of electric cars, right? I'm going to, in this region, right? Not the borders of this joint stock company, but in this hub, right? I am going to have everything necessary for it happening here in order to reduce as much friction as possible from the productivity, from the production chain, from the trade flows. And we're just going to do it all. And so that means it's everything, right? It's from like the research, the PhDs, the colleges, the labor, that whole funnel is going to be co-located with the factories, the capital investment. We're going to have, we're going to do the mining and the raw material stuff ourselves, or our companies or things that we have relationships with will do it to reduce the friction between relationships there. We're going to be connected to transport networks. We'll be close to some sort of way to get our goods to our customers. And we basically will have everything necessary for like a fully packaged economy. And it'll be a platform built around, in this case, electrification, regional manufacturing. And you get everything in it. It's like vertical integration of an industry instead of a company. And you have even like, I think the sort of Soviet model of like, oh, we have some big company that does it all itself is like getting it very wrong. And so the Chinese strategy is, okay, you have lots of small companies, you make them fight, you make them compete, you reinvest in the good ones. It's like very sort of like a play box. It's like a sandbox of capitalism. But then it's all just functioning within the sandbox of like, okay, there's like 50 million people who live in this region, and like maybe we're going to move it. Maybe we're going to move the whole thing because there's a slightly better spot actually. Like, right? So like the bike city that I was talking about earlier, the reason it is where it is because it's like in the heartland of China, because that's where they felt like their industrial base should be centered because it was harder to like attack militarily, like Japan, whatever, America, like so that's inland. That city's inland where they make all the bikes. And there's like millions of people there, and that's what they do. And then there's a trade network to get it all out. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's the whole package. It's like, you're like, okay, we do the mining, we do the smelting, the batteries, with control systems. Who's going to make the electronics? Who's making the circuit boards, right? Like, it just like think about all of the analog semiconductors. Like, you need everything.
Yeah, it's a sandbox. I guess like it's self-contained and experimental within China, but then it's a sandbox that other people have to come and play with. This brings us back to your BMW example. And I'm just gonna read the writing because I like this so much. You wrote, the reality of the real world is that most organizations, including governments, operate hierarchically and focus their attention in a top-down manner on the things that are easiest for them to measure and understand. So when the European bureaucrats want to accelerate the transition to electric-powered transportation, the smallest possible unit of their society that they can interact with is called BMW, enterprise value $100 billion. So they take Mr. BMW and they sit him down and they tell him that if he sells any non-electric cars, they're going to shoot him. He protests. He asks for some time to comply, 15 years. Who the fuck makes batteries and how do we get 3 million of them a year? Mr. BMW asked the senior executives, the smallest unit within his organization that he can interact with. I just think that's like very, very funny. So where does he go? Why does that happen? And then where does Mr. BMW turn?
Yeah, I mean, you know who he turns to. And actually, the person he turns to was like a 1,000-word subsection that I cut out of this essay to save space. It's its own hilarious thing. I think you said earlier, like, oh, where do you get these like little stories or something? Let me just tell you this one because it's so it is everything, and I'm very sad I had to cut it out of the essay. So the state-owned enterprise has a Western name called Brilliance Auto that BMW has to interact with. They make BMWs. They have factories that like BMW's invested in, and they make like over 500,000 a year of these things or something. And maybe it's over 500,000 cars total. And if BMW wants to sell anything in China, they've got to deal with Brilliance Auto or the state-owned enterprise, however you pronounce it. So I was thinking, you saw me earlier with the e-bikes. Where did this company come from, and what is it? Right? Like, isn't that like? I mean, who picks this one, right? Like, imagine you were Xi Jinping and you have to pick one. How do you pick? How do you do it? And its backstory is incredible. So it was like a 1990s minibus making company, and like they were manufacturing at scale, transport. Like maybe back then the average Chinese consumer couldn't buy a car, but you need a lot of minibuses because the government will buy those to bus. It's like a great, actually wonderful development story. Anyway, the founder of that company becomes the third richest man in China. There's like a Forbes piece you can find about him from 2001, something like that, 2000 or 2001. And his factory is going well. And then he wants to relocate his factory from where it is right now to a different part of China. So he's like, okay, I'm going to move my factory here. I'm going to do a big factory over there. You know the way these things work. Like maybe the local governor will give me some like investment. There's incentives. This is industrialism. This is how it works. That happens. But there's a problem. The local governor of where he wants to move his factory to wants him to put it like in a specific spot. And he's the third richest man in China. And he's like, I'm going to put it over there. So they have a little disagreement. And if this was America, maybe the disagreement would be like, there'd be some angry tweets, right? But of course, it being 1990s China, what happens is that the local governor says, great, I actually now own your entire equity stake in that company. Yeah, like that's my equity now. You, I don't know, I'm going to sue you for corruption or something. And that businessman has lived in exile in America ever since. And that governor was Xi Jinping's primary opponent, opposition before his like final seizing of power in 2012. And that governor is now spending life in prison for corruption, which like probably he was corrupt because he did this. I don't know. There's many other things. And that like husk of a company, that like corporate shell is the thing that Mr. BMW is forced to interact with. And you're like, why is it a state-owned enterprise? I don't know. I mean, that's the story.
That's
right?
Amazing. Because I mean, like, reading this piece, there's a risk of, to your point, kind of like over celebrating China. And there are trade-offs that you have to make to be able to get this machine.
This is like, it's like horrific. And you're like, oh my gosh, like that's how business, like, but this is kind of like, these are the people we're competing against. This is like BMW is not just competing against this industry, but it's forced to do business with it. And you're like, I mean, everyone's got skeletons in their closet. Obviously, the West and our companies have plenty, but just that little story is you're like, wow, that's incredible.
You like kind of answered another question that I had here, because like just even just like kind of tactically in writing the piece, like you talk about Mr. BMW and then you go to the punchline, which is they have to partner with Mercedes and what turns out to be Brilliance. But you write in the piece is state-owned Huachen Automotive Group Holdings Co. Limited. So you have the BMW story. You've like researched this and learned this, and then you like go back and you make that section about Mr. BMW. Is that like kind of tactically how you're putting this all together?
I mean, honestly, it's like, this is not even a unique story. Like that's the thing, is like there are like 1,000 of these little stories. I just happen to think BMWs are cool. If I have like a couple successful IPOs, I'd like to buy up like a nice one. Like I think they're cool and I like them. And so that's like kind of an interesting hook. They're like a German company. I've written about Germany. I think Germany's kind of done a lot of bad decisions lately. So it's like sort of, there's like some irony that I just have like a personal attachment to that whole story, which makes it the one I write about, but it's not even unique. There are like a million of these versions where like, yeah, I mean, like what happened with Alibaba and Jack Ma even somewhat recently. It's the same cycle, right? There's actually hundreds of them. And it's like, that's the way business happens there and here, and that's their system. And so all I had to do was find one I cared about and read the Wikipedia.
The Jack Ma one almost made sense because it was happening at the national level. The fact that like just the local governor is also able to do this is kind of crazy. But yeah, this is what we're up against. While we're like kind of last little bits on transportation before we move to the rest of the essay, but I just think these like tidbits are so good. What's the deal with Stark and Suron? And I want you to include something that you hid in a footnote. There's like so much. The footnote is like a whole other kind of good essay, the footnote section. But how did Segway's innovation contribute to Suron's dominance?
Segway probably was a bad company. I mean, they failed to scale, right? They didn't hit product market fit. They were kind of like a laughing stock, whatever. But they had some good innovations, and they patented some of those innovations. And like, you remember, they had like the walking things that would balance it. But like, imagine what they might have patented inside the electronics of that. So they had stuff. I don't know all their patents. They had stuff around. I know they had stuff around auto balancing. They had stuff around turning things off when they fall over. They had stuff around being able to sense like rotation of a like rotational member to calculate speed, so that you could like electronically stop your thing from accelerating to like way too fast. If there was a user input that was faulty. They had a bunch of patents around this stuff that are pretty cool. And it's like kind of classic American innovation, and like that's great. Also, they made some products, but they were trying to make it in an ecosystem that maybe they were doing a bad job. Maybe the ecosystem wasn't friendly. They had a facility in New Hampshire with like 20 people or whatever, eventually after selling themselves. Anyway, so they're struggling. They get bought by a investment firm based out of Boston, I think. And there's like some like news story that you can read. I love going, whenever you're doing this stuff, like go to Google and type in like the thing you're looking for, but then set like the Wayback Machine, like the finding of Google, the time thing, to like 2010, and you just get the funniest things. And so there's some story from this investment firm that's buying Segway for like $9 million or something. It's like, it's like buying it for parts. And they're like, yeah, we're going to double down. We're going to invest, expand manufacturing. It's going to be great. We'll keep jobs here, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they like immediately go to the international world trade courts, and they're like, China is infringing on our patents with these e-scooters that they've just started to make in mass production, which is its own separate thing. About, it's like an Israeli actually who created the e-scooters, took it to a factory in China, and that factory is where all the e-bikes are now made, like separately or something like that. Anyway, separate tangent. Anyway, so Segway is like bought by this firm. The firm goes, they sue China for the patents. China, instead of like settling, they just buy the company. $75 million. So the investment firm turns 9 million into 75, which is like this wonderful slice of life for why this like free trade system is good, because you get lots of great equity return. Like, I mean, if I ever get a return like that, that'd be great. And yeah, within like 18 months, the entire American operation is closed. All the jobs are gone. Everything is deleted. Segway is now just like a brand that you can buy online that's attached to these e-scooters that were being manufactured at the scale of like $2 billion of revenue from Chinese factories that are awesome. And of course, again, like when you make $2 billion of revenue, these things, you make them better. And so like the reality is probably the patents that were being infringed were also being improved, because like that's how tech works, right? And they make some really cool scooters. I have one. I have a cool scooter. I don't have a Segway.
You're part of the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm an extra level problem, because I've got the knockoff brand of the knockoff that's like even better and kind of cooler and kind of rickety, but it goes faster. Segway's gone. The jobs are gone, but you got a great equity return, and like, go get a job below the API somewhere else. Like, sorry. And by the way, you can buy your scooter now that's cheaper and it's being manufactured by China. Like, say thank you. And that's kind of like the destiny of Segway. It's like China gets the factory, they get all the jobs, they get the like $2 billion of revenue. American equity holders get an incredible return. American labor I mean, go work a surfaces job somewhere. It's like, I don't know, good luck getting into your kids getting into college or something. Maybe get like better luck next time. And then the Stark piece you asked about. Stark is this European company. I almost felt bad talking about them because I should talk about Dust Moto more, but they're just not at production yet. Stark is this European version. And, again, as with Europe, like the founder moved from the Nordics, Sweden, I'm going to get it wrong, sorry, and to Spain, right? Because you can test bikes all year round in Spain, and that's great. It's like it's like the EU wonder story. It's like you relocate with freely, you start a capital, you start a firm, you're producing stuff. They are actually using all the latest high quality components, they're innovating on manufacturing techniques. It's super cool. And of course, the regulations, the local government kind of hates them. He's out there complaining, and maybe he's just complaining to be the CEO, but everyone knows how tough it is to start a new business at scale in the environment that is the European regulatory regime. And it's no wonder that he's complaining about the local government effectively feeling they're trying to put him out of business. And the end result of 8,000 little things is that his product is twice as expensive and at operating at a small scale. And I think the company might make it. They have some really cool stuff. They have product market fit. Even people who aren't usually electric bikes people are know about the product, and okay, maybe there's some criticisms around some electric bikes from traditional bike people, but 80 horsepower on a electric bike is nuts. That's crazy. You don't need that. And so it's kind of cool. It's like the Tesla Roadster strategy of the OG. You just make a really cool high performance product, and you'll get that brand and that performance. So I love it. It just costs twice as much, and it's it's tough.
I was on an arc boat recently, an electric boat, and it's cool. Ooh. Seeing it's quiet. It turns like crazy. There's thrusters on the side, so actually docking it is way easier. And that's one of the tragedies of this whole thing to me. Everyone's so excited about AI, and I'm I think it's cool. I think it's really good software and super fast. But I think the electrification of everything is going to be a way bigger deal, including you have to obviously electrify all the data centers and do all of that. And to not be the best in that is a real travesty, to not have that platform.
A lot of the innovation was stuff that we did create. I mean, that is kind of the pitch around the free market stuff is oh, we'll just do the innovation and China can make it for us, but the reality of making stuff is you eventually end up innovating yourself as well. That's so I don't even, it's I think it's tragic.
Is there, I wrote a pretty cheesy piece the other day about us against space time and humans alive on this planet. And I believe this, humans alive on this planet at this time in this great big universe over 100 billion years is the most identifying thing on a cosmic scale. It's crazy coincidence that we all live here together. Is there a different Pareto frontier that we could get to if we're all just decided, if you implanted in someone's brain, hey, it's actually really great that China can make all this stuff really, really well and that we do IP. Is there a real globalism that has not been tried that actually makes sense?
I think there's a reasonable case. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, you always have to look at it from the perspective of people. It's kind of the reflexive default to be to of certain people like us to be oh, let's look at the global scale. But I think no matter what's happened over the last 20-30 years is probably the best thing for the people of China that could have ever happened. And so you always have to ask who's it good for and who's it not. But certainly I think what you're getting at in the way that you're asking it is the sort of post World War II, pre-collapse of Bretton Woods era of America. The basically the promise, the goal, the idea was Europe's a mess. It's blown itself up. There's no industrial capacity. Japan's a mess, and we rewrote the constitution, and we did all the same stuff. And we're the last one standing. And basically, if you want to sell American goods, you need people who are rich enough to buy them. That's trade is good. Rich trading partners are really good. That's you need them, and they help you accelerate your own way up the the civilizational scale. And so the American hack was, we're going to make our trading partners richer. We'll make them richer. We'll basically help them industrialize their own countries, make them richer, and they'll be able to buy more of our stuff. We'll trade virtuously. We'll police the seas for free. 10 years ago, Zyhom was talking about a lot of this stuff being the American deal, and it created, I would say, two and a half generations of like American prosperity, the likes of which, like, hadn't been seen before, and who knows about next. Like, pretty good. Lots of turmoil domestically too. So I'm not saying that the time was perfect, but just like economically, it's a really good pitch and a really good story. I think like the tragic underbelly to it, or like the risk of it, is like, it kind of also requires, in like a sort of paternalistic, quasi-imperialistic sense, which is like a little sketchy, like American hegemony. Because like as soon as somebody else is like, okay, well, you guys are making yourselves richer in that virtuous little ecosystem, like, we want a slice, then the American pitch is like, well, now you need to comply with our rules-based international order. Like, you got to comply with what we do. And it works really well until someone else who's big enough says no. And then they make it work. And now the whole thing, you're like, okay, it's kind of coming apart at the seams, because how do we deal with this? Like, how do we, and then anyway.
China has that part of the world, but they're like America in terms of values and everything else. Is this a problem?
I feel like you just have to leave that to the reader. I don't know. It depends. It depends what you're optimizing for and who you're optimizing for and what your answer is. And I have friends who would say, yes, it's a big problem. We need American global supremacy. I have friends who would say, no, it's wonderful. Let them do them. We don't want to be involved. I think I leave it to the reader.
Another kind of controversially one that maybe leave it to the reader, maybe not, but is the green movement just really the West kind of being like, buy China? Has it inadvertently done more for China than it's done for the environment?
Yeah, probably. I mean, who makes the solar panels? Who does the well, it depends. It depends. If your North Star is good for the environment, right? Like, if your North Star is less carbon emissions or whatever, right? Is it not the greatest trade ever? Like, wonderful, right? We got what we needed. If your North Star is making China richer, also wonderful. Got what we needed. It's just, what happens if your North Star is making Americans or Europeans or Australians richer? Then it's maybe not as clear. But and that's what I mean on the priorities. Like,
this is why my like Pollyanna-ish attitude towards this is like why I'm like so frustrated in this moment in time, because I'm like, we actually got to the point where like you actually, to go green, you had to make a bunch of economic sacrifices. Now you don't as much anymore. Like, solar panels are getting cheap, batteries are getting good, like it's all working. And now we're at the point where we're going to be like, blow the whole thing up. Like, finally, when we've made all these trade-offs and it's like starting to be economical, it seems like a crazy moment in time for that to happen, just like from a cosmic joke kind of scale.
It is, but it is tragic and funny. It is like tragic comedy, which I think is like a lost. I understand much more now why it was popular with the ancients when life was horrible and the world was exploding, because you got to laugh, and it's like it's tragic, man.
It's a little tragic. All right, so the other maybe that one is like up for judgment, whether it's good or bad for us, whether it has been, whether it will be. The other one that I thought was interesting that you talk about is, you say that like, one of our arguments that we make is, because we design the iPhones, like, we're better off. And like, now we can ship all the sock factories. I made a joke about sock factories today. Everyone's making sock factory jokes. Like, we ship that all overseas, but we design iPhones. And so like, more people just need to learn how to design iPhones. You argue that doesn't work because, one, fewer people are needed to actually build tech companies. And that one's pretty straightforward. But I love the other one, which is that few people are actually capable of doing the work. Can you just like walk me through the whole argument for like why we can't all be iPhone designers?
This stuff is hard. Like, like, I mean, me neither. Not to say that making one in a factory isn't hard, but like, I made Warhammer as a kid. I could probably like kind of figure it out. Right. But like, maybe actually my wife would probably criticize my fine motor skills. But making stuff is really hard. And making valuable stuff, like defining stuff, I mean, the people who do it are handsomely paid. The logic of, people talk about free markets all the time. Like, labor markets are relatively free in America. Like in California, you can just like quit one company, start working in the competitor the next day. I don't know if you can do that in China, but like, you can just do it. And so like, if there were how many, what percent of the population's in the labor force? Like, if there were like 150 million people who, as of tomorrow, could design iPhones as well as everyone else, what do you think would happen to labor markets? Like, obviously the price of that labor would go down. Like, the reason you have the fancy house in Redwood City or Woodside or whatever is because it's hard to do what you do, or like you've achieved some like, control over some sort of value capture mechanism. It's hard. Like, it just is. It's just hard to do. People can't do it. it's good, it's fine, it's not a sin, it's not a tragedy that people can't design iPhones, or that like writing really good software is really hard and making really good, it's nothing wrong with it. It's just I think there's this kind of like reflexive, well, it depends on which side of the spectrum you're on, but like there is a sense of like, just it's a skill issue. You should improve yourself, work harder, learn to code, learn to design iPhones, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And like, certainly when I was younger, I was, and, trying to learn myself and pull myself up a little bit. Like I loved that. It was great. It was like motivating. It's motivating to believe, but like you also have to recognize the reality that not everyone is going to succeed. And if you are willing to confront the reality that not everyone's going to succeed, you also have to confront the reality that you share a country with those people who aren't going to succeed at learning how to make iPhones, and they can vote and they can express their opinion in writing essays or whatever else lovely things it is they do. Whatever it is they like lobby for is probably going to be much worse and pretty bad for productivity and outcomes, because they want their kids to be better off than they are too, just like everyone else on Earth. And like something's got to give.
What happens if AI 2027 is right and everyone has an iPhone designer in their pocket? Like, is this even more destabilizing than we think?
I don't know. I'm really bad at like the sort of, I don't know what the word is. How do you describe the sort of, like it's not quite doomsaying, because some of it's like utopian, but it's like everything's going to radically change in the future. I generally think these things are like play out more slowly, with lots of time for dislocations to impact people and maybe be addressed. And I don't know. I'm a believer in AI being pretty awesome. I use it. It's great, but like, yeah, I making things is hard.
It is like kind of funny, and I guess we're in the, like a red queen's race, maybe is the right way to describe it, whatever, with China on AI models, and so they're going to do it anyway, and so we have to do it. But if you believe that America's advantage is the IP and the design and all of that, and the fact that we're like racing to make that like
to go away,
it's commoditized good, is actually super ironic in a way that I hadn't appreciated before.
Me neither, until you just put it like that. But yes, it is an interesting throwback to the people who's like, oh, at least we get to do the high value labor because we are seemingly making the high value labor.
Funny. We're essentially like packaging American brilliance in a product and giving it to everybody for like increasingly cheap.
Maybe all that's left at the end of the day is people making socks in factories. Like maybe that's the only thing that's left for the AI. I don't know.
I'm gonna need more feet. All right. So maybe we can move around. You talk about the fact that industrial hubs no longer have to be next to customers, but services do. Like, now that we're talking about kind of the haves and the have-nots, how does this impact all of that?
I've written about this before, so if I'm skimming over something, just tell me. But like I think people generally are very good at having sort of mental models that work. The same ones that we all got from sort of just sort of surface level undergraduate education and reading whatever, Wall Street Journal, whatever. But modeling what happens T+1, 2, 3, and down the road is a little less intuitive for folks. And so one of the things that I have been writing about for a long time, since I first realized it, and there's some good papers that I read a long time ago when I was doing one of these rabbit holes, is that like the benefit of the industrial climb, the thing that everyone's done, the benefit of global markets, globalism with domestic production and all this stuff, is that you can sell goods into a global market, which is very large, full of very rich people who are willing to send you money if your goods are good. And the beauty of, maybe it's American hegemony, maybe it's like the trade routes the British Empire created, maybe it's whatever, China's domestic supply chains. The beauty of it all is that like it's pretty seamless. The fixed costs are pretty low. You can make a lot of money making stuff and just selling it to the global market. And maybe the global market includes a lot of domestic customers, right? Like we are part of the global market. And so you can be in America and sell to Americans, and you're selling into the global market because they could have bought elsewhere. But the beauty of it is that the cost of getting your good from your factory or your Etsy shop or whatever it is to the end customer is very low. Like, and even with the massive scale goods, right? We have these containers, and everyone like kind of just rediscovered them and thought they were really cool a few years ago. Like, it's
thanks to the box.
The box, right? It's awesome, and it means you can put the factory making stuff wherever the hell you want. I mean, within reason, right? Like, don't put it on a mountain. But like, you can put it. Ideally, it's near a waterway or near a trade route or near trains. But like, you can put it somewhere where you can then connect it to global trade and global markets and make your money, which means you are not constrained by the feudalism of landlords and the sort of rat race for competing for real estate that everyone else gets crushed by. You're not constrained to needing to be in a certain place and select for labor, which is why like the Industrial Revolution, we had all these industrial towns that just went and got started up somewhere. Okay, we're going to make here, the land's cheap. We'll make a bunch of free houses. Everyone who works here can just have a free house because land's cheap, whatever. It's like a small fraction. It's basically the box for housing. Hey, if you guys want a job, come here, factory town, boom. Which now China decided to do at the scale of like cities, but like you can just do that. Well, you can't just do it. It's very hard, but you can do it. It is in the sphere of possible, in the space of possible outcomes is any random place that is not New York, Manhattan real estate can make stuff and sell it into the global market, which means the sort of like underlying margin profile of the business and also of laborers who want to sell their labor to that business just ends up the wealth that is created from the sale of the product into the global market is less captured by landlords and sort of just real estate burden, and it ends up with the people and capital in very pleasing arrangements for both labor and capital, and that is very good. What is less good about the services economy that we love and dearly is that with the brief exception of like the first 2 years of COVID that is now sort of turned off a little bit again, and only for elite workers, right? Not for the food delivery people and everyone like that. But mostly, if you're selling services, you need to co-locate next to the person you're selling your services to. And if you want to make any money at all selling services, that means you need to co-locate next to your wealthiest possible customer that you can personally find. And this is something that I understood in theory. There's like this wonderful anecdote I've written like 8,000 times of like my barber telling me he moved from like North Carolina to my town. And I'm like, I see what you charge. Like that was a great decision. And like if you're a landscaper, right? Like go do it in like Napa, not in like Detroit, right? Like, I don't know, like wealthy people that you can sell your services to is the only way to make money in services. But everyone else knows that, which means you're now funneled down the funnel of real estate landlords, and now your rent's going through the roof. Now you're getting radicalized, and you're trying to find out who to blame. Maybe it's housing policy, maybe it's the politicians. I don't know what it is. The rents are out of control, but it's like you're necessarily funneled to live next to capital, and so like this is the law of rent just taking ownership of you.
This is even funnier in the context of your piece. But another thing that this makes me think of is like, maybe one of the ways out of this is flying cars. And then you think about like who's actually making flying cars right now. And there's the video that came up the other day that we'll maybe throw on the screen. And it's, the Chinese are the ones who, we have some flying cars here, but regulatorily it's going to be impossible to get them in the air. But like the thing that it makes me think is like, what about like an hour outside of the city or an hour and a half, or like that radius of where people can live and serve the city? Like maybe that gets decoupled in the same way that the shipping container decoupled industrial location from customers.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, depending on your political and favored pet policies, there's like a whole bunch of solutions to this that everyone has, right? Like there's the public transport folks who are like, we just need to build trains, or like just build public transport, right? And that kind of bleeds into the crime problem. It's like, I'm just sitting in my car. I don't want to deal with that. You've got the flying cars folks who are like, building cool shit is cool. We should, an hour is time, but distance and time have a relationship. So like as long as you move faster, you can actually be farther away. You could live on a mountain and commute in and be in downtown. That's great. You've got we just need to deregulate San Francisco, and that will suddenly make rent there cheaper, people, which like, you should deregulate, but also it won't make the rents cheaper. Yeah, everyone has their pet policy. I think to some extent, all of them are kind of right. Like in a utopian world where it worked, it would be right. But like, what would happen 5 years later? Well, everyone still needs to make money in services. Everyone still needs to come to the same place. You can kick the can down the road a decade or two, but like, I don't know if you get 2 decades, to be honest. Like at some point, people are pretty quick about moving to this to locate their labor next to their clients, and you probably end up with a lot more people. And I don't know.
The good thing about circles is how their area scales as they go out, right? Like you can be in any one of these spots there. And so like the bigger the circle gets, the wider the radius, the more area there is for people to live in.
This is true. Maybe it works. I'm just sort of imagining I would love it to work. But it's sort of, you're still trapped in services hell to some degree. And I'm skeptical that that's like the path out for the sort of median person.
This is another one of those, like, it's not like a positive Moloch, but it's not like someone, trying to take advantage of polluting the waters where everybody fishes or whatever. It's not like a terribly negative Moloch, but everyone acting self-interested, system level thing that is tough. Another one that you talk about that like really strikes close to home, because I'm like, like maybe this piece trends into something about how like this is actually all like totally solvable, is you talk about this like thing that we're really, really good at, which is like optimizing for returns and having capital seek the highest growth opportunity is like actually, kind of the reason that all of this has happened in the West. Like there is like the, right now Main Street versus Wall Street thing. And I think if you personified Wall Street as the people who like high returns, there is like kind of some blame there, although it seems more systems level. Just explain that piece of the essay, because we're going to try to figure out how to fix it. But what's going on? What are we up against?
Yeah, that wasn't in the first draft, and I was talking with a friend who's trying to raise money for his hardware company, and I was like kind of joking with him about this essay, and then I was like adding a little picture to the section of the essay where I'm like, okay, I'm not just because I'm talking up China doesn't mean I love China. Like I this is like an adversarial respect thing, and I was like, I should put in the essay why America is so great. Like, let me explain that like private capital markets, we are the mecca on earth for like turning $10 into $100. Like that you come to America, this is a capitalist heaven. Like that's what we do, right? So I kind of have that whole section in the essay as like a addendum that I added in where I thought it fit best after the fact to be like, this is what we're really good at. And I think I titled it like the logic of capital, which is just like a really funny Marxist slogan that I think is like an ironic thing to kind of reclaim. But it basically just says like, look, the thing that we do is maximize the return on capital, and there are some constraints, and our system has certain things that it incentivizes over others. But basically, what we do is we take $10 and turn it into $100. And so like, if you were in 1995 and you had the opportunity to invest in this electrification thing that I'm pitching that's like worth like trillions of dollars right now, that's awesome. If you had a pile like hundreds of millions of dollars, $100 million to invest, even $50 million, and you put it into that thing, you would have not seen like a meaningful like equity return for like on the scale of 20 years. Like I think most of these fund life cycles are like plus or minus on 10 years. So like you take 1995 and you go plus 10, the iPhone doesn't exist. Like you're still like you're I don't know how many batteries you're making, but like you have terrible margins. The alternative in America was you invest in like Amazon, eBay, like 5 other billion-dollar software companies. Like you would literally just be terrible at your job if you ever chose to not invest in those things and turn $10 into $100. Like that was like that was like a slam dunk thing. The nature of America's capital markets generally, like maybe like Silicon Valley to some degree, it's private now, but maybe back in the day there was some government funding. Like a lot of people have talked about this. I put it in the essay. Like the government co-locating was kind of like a nascent industrialism happening on the West Coast that was very good for America. That's where things have stuck, which is an interesting learning, by the way, around the stickiness of trade routes and industrialism. Is it's things are sticky once you get them. But yeah, I kind of just talking about capital, IRR. This stuff matters a lot. One of the things that I forget if you said it or someone else said it, but it's like, oh, well, what if we just put more capital into the system?
I didn't, but that's great.
Would you choose batteries in 1995?
Oh, I did. I sent that to you. Yeah.
And I was like, the thing is, we just lived through like 2 years of the most insane flooding the zone with capital on Earth. And what happened is that every dollar that gets allocated still has to return the fund probabilistically. Like 1 in 10 of them has to. And so they just bid up the price of the same assets until it was no longer profitable in like some bizarro dollar.
Kind of. And it's interesting, right? Because like in the moment, that's true. Mm-hmm. If you look at it kind of like a couple of years removed now, there is now a push, and this is like kind of how I'm focused, a push towards funding kind of these things that before would have seemed crazy to fund. One, I think because we flooded so much capital into software that the returns just actually aren't there anymore, and we flooded so much into building AI. So like software returns are even outside of a few AI companies are even more challenged. And so you have no choice. So maybe if you do flood with capital, it is good because you almost have no choice now but to invest in these harder things that might take a little bit longer, although like there has been some infrastructure built up around them that could make that not be the case. But yeah, maybe ZERP was good.
This is the private capital version of the Deng Xiaoping argument, where it's like, okay, if it goes so egregiously bad that we learn, and then we start allocating capital elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, I hope so. The issue for me is just that the time cycle of these things can be long, and the benefit of all the stuff we built and innovated on semiconductors is like when the underlying tech is improving so fast, a lot of these fixed costs that get in the way of making equity returns just evaporate, because you can scale a firm and there's no one even to compete with, or whatever.
But you do show. I'll push back on this because like you struck at my my current investment thesis, and so
Yeah.
so I want to just want to understand your perspective on this. Like,
Yeah.
we are at a spot now. You show the battery chart where you're like nothing happened, something happened, and like
Yep.
there is this platform economy. Maybe we're cutting ourselves off from it intentionally now, and so maybe that's like really bad for all the companies that I invest in. But do we now start seeing some of the stuff that was Moore's law like with things that are based on batteries?
I'm simultaneously a cynic and a pessimist, but also willing to be to bet on America and optimism, which is it's sort of a overlap of Schrodinger's beliefs. So yeah, that battery chart I included because there is like a hint of optimism in it as well. Like the pessimism is that all these things are really sticky, and we've spent 30 years entrenching industrial supply chains and trade routes with like an adversary who like doesn't want to let go of them, and that's more than one company to build around here. Like we need, I'm talking like university research co-located next. I mean, you need the whole platform. Big asks, but yeah, the underlying rate of improvement, especially with the demand. So you've got like this virtuous cycle of like, there's a lot more demand for large product at scale, which means there's going to be capital flowing in, not just investment capital, but productive consumption. And then that can be reinvested, which is very nice because that lets you fund longer investment time horizons. It could be, you just need, and I think there needs to be very broad agreement and alignment around these things. Otherwise, you're going to get hamstrung.
It's funny now that we think about it. Like, think about the Moore's law chart versus the battery chart.
Mm-hmm.
Moore's law, like, chips gave the government capabilities that they could not have gotten anywhere else, no matter what trade-offs they decided to make. And so they became an early buyer, and like that spurned it. And you talk about that a little bit.
Yep.
With batteries, like, if the climate was the most important thing in the world for the past 20 years, defense is actually still above that. And so they're like, yeah, we'll just burn like a shitload of oil, and like that's bad for, supply chains, military supply chains, and all of that. But like, it's not, batteries aren't a thing that the military needed quite as badly as they needed chips in the early days. And so like maybe they didn't fund that. Is there anything there with like kind of how, like, why it didn't get steep until very, very long? Or is it just a more complex supply chain than chips are?
I don't know. I think with a lot of these things, there is like, with a lot of these things, meaning sort of foundational investments or improvements in underlying technology that somehow accumulate, and then you get a step function change. I think with a lot of these things, like, you just had to do all the little things for a long time and without knowing exactly when the payoff was going to happen. And then, the sort of, it was inevitable that there was going to be a payoff. The issue is like, you can go on Wikipedia and be like, when was the first electric car made? And it was like 1897 or 1870 or something, right? Like, we've had electric cars. In fact, the military had electric trucks in freaking, I think it was World War I or II.
Yeah.
Right? Because the oil supply was constrained, and you just charge them up at night or for a week or whatever, and then you could zip about. So like, the military did have electric trucks back then, which is crazy to think about. Like, crazy. They look wild. It's just, you really had to wait for the tech to get to the point that we're talking about, Mr. BMW, I need 5 million batteries. And now that's real scale. That means I can invest in boom, boom, boom. And now I can fund like 85 PhD researchers at a facility next door, and the capital and the industrial production, right? Because I talked about we were talking about scooters earlier, right? Like, making 1 million of anything is a really good way to move the margin forward on what you can do and innovate and figure out new things. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I think we just had to accumulate a lot of wins. Maybe
that sounds probably right to me, but I've just never thought about it this way, where like, it's almost like chips didn't have a substitute. It was like a net new capability. And so no matter how bad and expensive it was in the beginning, there's a buyer for that thing. Whereas like, batteries have had a substitute for like 99% of their uses. Batteries have a substitute, and it's polluting and it's hard to move around and all of that, but it's a substitute. Yeah. And I do think that probably shapes a little bit like the dynamics of those curves.
And also, contemporaneous with the time period you're talking about, America was like the world's largest oil producer. This was very good for us. We hold, part of our geopolitical strategy has been to hold our hand over the oil pump for the world. Like, if we also were discarding that, there's like a, you familiar like the innovator's dilemma? There's like the geopolitical economy version of that, which is like the, the oil producer's dilemma or something.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, and then you write, tariffs can't save you from all of this. Why not?
Well, there's a 12,000 word essay where I try to make this case, but I'm broadly aligned with the idea that if you wanted or thought reindustrialization was good, which like it's an option, I don't think it's the only path, but like if you wanted to do that, tariffs would probably be a necessary and good component to do it, especially with the adversary and China and that whole situation. But like tariffs do not actually build factories, they don't employ labor, they don't get goods to market, they don't get goods to port, they don't get the goods from the port to the end consumer, they don't solve crime, they don't make people want to come work for you, they don't make it sexy or cool, which is like it matters a lot to attracting like high quality human talent. They don't, there's the barriers to actually going from A to B are many, and even if we put enormous, and this is the context of the essay was not what happened last week or whatever, but in my head, even double what happened last week, you still got to do all the other stuff. Like you have to nurture domestic environment, you've got to get rid of all the red tape, you've got to make starting businesses good, you've got to have the whole.
And it almost seems like, I mean, you only get 4 years to be president. We've talked about, and maybe we could talk about actually a little bit more why that's a good or a bad thing. But if you were the grand emperor of the universe, maybe you do tariffs, but you like deregulate and cut the red tape at the very least first, so that like we're definitely going to start hearing like some Onion headlines soon about how people are trying to start domestic production and like getting like NEPA is blocking them, or like something is completely getting in the way, and like we can't actually build the factories that we need to build in America.
There's probably some case for like, oh, every time we hear that complaint, that's how we'll know what we need to change or something. It's just like, you know how the reality of this thing works. Like there's like what's seen and what's not seen. For everyone who complains, there'll be 10 people who just don't do anything because they know it'll be painful. So like, we're not even going to bother.
Maybe there's ATHS, but like, I guess like you use so much political capital on this too, that like the stuff that people wanted on the deregulation side, which actually I think there was a clear path for, like you might not have the political capital for anyway, because the left out can push. Man, this is like actually ATHS, but I don't know if anybody actually knows that they're playing ATHS, but you like almost need to.
And then there's the currency problem, right? Like your currency rates, like I mean, I've written about this for the last few years. Like you have your reserve currency. If you want to sell stuff internationally, that's going to be painful for you. But if you want to fix that and reallocate that, that's going to be painful for Americans. There's just so much more to the picture.
Yeah, you mentioned one thing that like is more to the picture, crime rates. What do crime rates have to do with this?
Yeah, I think crime is one of these things that like kind of as with China, like it's a little gauche to talk about. Like, you know, like you're allowed to the proper thing for an American elite to do to complain about China is to complain about internal injustices, treatment of various groups, the fact that you can't talk about like we couldn't say on this podcast that certain event in a certain square that happened while Deng Xiaoping was in charge of China. Like there are things you can't say, and that's what you're allowed to complain about. Complaining about jobs, whatever, that's like, man, like haven't you taken Econ 101? It's lower class. Besides, like you want to work in a factory. Crime is the same thing. Like I think crime is to trade as complaining about jobs is to complaining about inequalities in China, in that like there is some lens in which like it's easier to complain about NAFTA and China than it is like our own inability to make like it not incredibly painful to build an industrial hub in America, co-locate your family next to it, and like not have parts leave the warehouse in the middle of the night, not have it be a crime-ridden hellhole. Like it's like it codes as a certain tribe, and maybe I only feel like so obvious about it because I immigrated to America, but like it codes all these things that you just don't want to be associated with if you're an elite in America, to talk about crime in this way. But I mean, you look at a couple charts, you don't have to be like a rocket scientist to understand like the impact of real world physical crime on building real world companies where there are real world goods moving about, where you need real world people and their families moving about next to this thing. Like you don't need to be a genius to do this. You don't need to be a genius to look at the charts of crime rates historically and compare like, oh, this is when crime went up and this is when we stopped making stuff. And I don't think these things are causal unidirectionally. It's like a sort of like vicious cycle where like once it gets a little bad, probably on the margin that makes people more disposed to crime, and if you don't fix that makes it worse, which then makes it more painful for capital to invest in the region, because like now it's worse and my labor is going to be more expensive. Like I think there's some pitch on San Francisco real estate that's like, to some degree San Francisco and New York maybe less New York, but certainly San Francisco, rents are more expensive because there are some places you don't want to live. And like, you're actually, and then that impacts companies because now labor demands more compensation. So like, but that whole funnel is okay if you're a tech company selling zero marginal cost software to the internet. But if you're like trying to sell actual goods, maybe that's not possible. So yeah, I just think like, and maybe it would be better for me to never talk about it. I would code as like more knowledgeable and higher class, but I just think it's this like, I mean, it's like a huge roadblock to building anything.
It is just funny, like to your point, like what is okay to talk about and what is not okay to talk about. Like it has become like you have to say globalism is bad. Like globalism is now just like a bad thing. To your point on like NAFTA and like not being the whole problem. I wrote this in the piece the other day too, where like it just feels like globalism is a safe place where you can be like, chunk, like anything complex that went wrong, we just say like globalism did it. And like, then you don't have to worry about the underlying causes. And that's a really dangerous thing when you can't actually talk about what the issues are, because then how the hell are you ever going to solve them?
There's one that I cut out of the essay as well, which is unions, which is like most of the people who engage with industrialism, building things at scale, recognize that for it to work, like the motivating factor behind it is like benefiting domestic labor. So like the motivating factor, the reason to do it is to make your people of your country wealthier. That's ultimately the reason to do it, which is the same purpose that most domestic unions have. But there's some friction there, right? And like there are less good things and more good things, but certainly you can get a lot of headaches, and they can get in the way of innovation and doing things and all this stuff. And in kind of the same way that, right, that's why I joke about the Irishman in the piece. Like there's crime, there's corruption, there's like both of those things dressed up as unions sometimes. And like the you step back 10,000 feet, you're like, okay, what does America do? We turn $10 into $100. We capital is king in America. If you offer capital on a silver platter, like an industrial platform that's going to work, maybe it's like, this is pretty good. If you offer it like a bunch of corruption and it's going to get abused by all these different people who have leverage over it, and it's not nice. The tragic thing about being labor is that capital can just leave. It could just go elsewhere, and it does, and it has, and it will. And like if you try and beat it up too much, it just leaves. And that's the game.
Every day now, on my way into my office, I walk past not one, but two of the like trucks with the big blow up rats on them, because the union is mad that non-union labor was used to build a store. I'm not going to name the companies that did it, because I support them in their desire to get work done, like for a quarter of the cost, not because they're underpaying, but because the labor's rates or unions rates are absolutely absurd, on a faster time schedule. Like the last company I worked for before I started writing the newsletter, we did commercial real estate and built out offices. And for most of the time we were able to just use kind of like our own crews. And some buildings, it's like, hey, you have to use union labor. And it was literally like 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Thursday, they'll work. The rate is 4 times high. Like it just made all of those spaces infeasible, and we couldn't, so it does gum up the works a little bit. Like obviously the original intent is incredible, and like you don't want people dying in factories because a greedy fat cat is taking full advantage of them. We've gone too far. I mean, we talked about the box earlier. It's a whole, like I tweeted a while back the joke that like it's ostensibly about like the impact of the shipping container, and it's really just about how like the longshoremen have always been against technological progress. Because the first quarter of the book is them just being like, nope, anything that's not us, like being hired to do nothing is bad.
You have to thread the needle on the trade-off between labor and capital. Like if domestic labor is too unhappy, they're going to like, no matter how bad you think it is right now, they will pick things that are way worse. And they can, and they will, whether you're a democracy or not, it doesn't actually matter. Like one way or another, if domestic labor is sufficiently unhappy, they'll do really bad things for productivity. So you need to make them happy. But on the flip side, if capital is unhappy too, it just leaves. So like there's a needle threading that is very hard to do. I think like it's a coherent definition of like good statesmanship to try and thread that needle. And I think, different countries have been let's say, differently good at doing it.
So I have two kind of big questions before we wind down into our final last three questions. You hit this in the footnotes too. Like I'm telling people, like when you read this piece, I know it's long, it's like half the length of a not boring piece, but read the footnotes too because they're great. You're right. What's eerie about this moment in 2025 is that the West is responding to domestic pressures by increasing the level of autocracy it practices and experiencing weakening democratic support for the state, the very things our system mitigates compared to China's. So democracy with Chinese characteristics doesn't seem to work because you don't get like the good, the long-term commitment, but you do get the bad, which is autocracy. You also write, I hope to convince at least a few readers that abandoning principle and prosperity is the worst trait of all. Talk about why this is an eerie moment and kind of like, if there's a principle, prosperity, autocracy, not quadrants, like what that quadrant looks like and why the other three might not be as bad. Like what's the trade-off we're making here?
And I put some caveat in there that's like, look, if you don't agree with me about increasing autocracy, like fine, whatever, I'll concede it. Because I just think like there are like 8,000 examples and it is what it is. I think if you can see it, you can see it. If you can't, I guess you really like the team that's winning, whichever team it is and whichever country it is, because it doesn't matter which, like just everywhere. Yeah, I kind of just, I think on the 2x2 quadrant, which is principle, like you keep your principles, you don't keep the principles, at least you get rich, you don't get rich, right? Prosperity principle. Like, I think you can kind of put Europe in the abandoned principles and abandoned prosperity camp. And that's kind of like the theme of the whole essay is like, it's tragic. This is awful. Like, what is going on? You've just got unrest, everything falling apart, it's falling to pieces. That the natural response of a nation's elite to like the populist unrest is to be like, you guys have no idea what you're talking about. Shut up and get with the program. Of course, you tell a bunch of unhappy people that like they're going to do it harder. Like it's just like, and so you just get like these spirals of like they're abandoning their principles, like just like just bizarro world of like simultaneously certain crimes are prosecuted and certain aren't. It's just bizarre. And then the flip side is like also they're just not getting rich. Like the thing about the Chinese lesson is the people didn't liberalize like the 2001 American elite thought they would, because they got rich. Like there's all these quotes from the 2001 early 2000s, and I love a lot of them of Chinese people being like, who cares if you can't say a few things on the internet? Like things are way better for me. And like maybe you think your country would be different and your culture is different and like maybe whatever, but like most people, if you make things a lot better for them and their kids, at least they are willing to trade some of their principles. And so like that's the keep prosperity, abandon principles thing. Is the Chinese, they didn't liberalize, they also abandoned communism. Like communism killed how many millions of people. All right, let's not do that. All we're going to do is so it's like Europe's the abandon. China's like keep prosperity. I think the promised land is you get to keep your principles and you keep your prosperity, which like is where I would like America to be. Certainly, it's not where England is. The interesting one that I think also, because I didn't want the essay to be a Conrad is aggressively lobbying for reindustrializing America through a campaign of 8 million massive reset buttons pressed on everything we do and blowing up 8,000. Like, I'm writing this for a hobby. Like this is like what I'm trying to lay out is like there is an alternate world and there is a path potentially to like the promised land where you keep both. I think what's interesting is to ask who sits in the keep your principles but maybe abandon prosperity camp. And my pitch for that is Japan. And my pitch is that Japan is a wonderful place to be, to visit, to live. Now, to Westerners, the culture can be pretty grating if you live there long term. Like it can be hard to integrate all this stuff. But like, and then the hours for the employees maybe aren't the greatest, and like lots of things to complain about if you're a nice privileged American. But like by and large, industrialized, very modern standards of living, modern standards of entertainment, pretty good metrics for the whole country. The country is like, it works. It's like somewhat efficient. And it's like pretty great place for the Japanese. I don't know that it's like what anyone should aspire to. I think people should aspire to prosperity. But like if you felt like prosperity was off the table, Japan is like this big warning sign, and I use it in like multiple of my essays as like this, like don't end up like this. But if you're going to lose the game, I think there are like graceful ways to lose, actually.
What you said though about it being not hostile, but like hard for foreigners to integrate.
Yeah.
I think like kind of makes that maybe hard. Like you couldn't imagine that that bucket happening in America, for example, because what is the set of principles that everybody agrees on? Like there, at least there is an ancient culture that you're trying to protect and everybody buys in on, and you have that and you're all the same. And in America, like good luck getting agreement on like anything even close to that. So it's like that's like not where you can be as America. So you almost have to be like, abandon like that actually is like the least likely quadrant for America to end up in, I would say, is the Japan quadrant.
Yes, America, we have to choose the promised land. From the lens of speaking to Europe, though, I think maybe Europe might find the Japanese example over the course of multiple decades, if they really don't want to choose prosperity. That's up to them. But like if they don't, I think their only option other than misery is to try and figure out how to do the Japanese version. I don't see how else, as otherwise it's going to be a disaster.
All right, I lied about the question. So is there a world in which like us, like America and China develop clean robots essentially, and then Europe actually can benefit in some way? Like they just sit back, they choose principles and poverty essentially, but they sit back and the world comes to them. And there's a world in like a few years where you can now start setting up like really automated, clean factories in Europe, and like there's no set of current regulations, at least, that can prevent you from building things.
I think that would be a very compelling pitch to some Europeans. I suspect the answer is no, though. Like, there's like, it's actually, you kind of extrapolate that away. You don't even need the tech. You get rid of the robots and you could say like, what if there was just some like tax and redistribute regime where you could have like a couple of businesses that you did the status quo on, and then like you made the people wealthy independently or whatever. But like it's very hard to figure out there's two parts to the value creation thing. There's value creation and value capture. And it's very hard to figure out that second one cleanly in a way that maintains happy labor, happy capital consistently over the course of more than like 4 years. A lot of these regimes, you can have robots, you can have whatever tax policy you like. Ultimately, either someone wants to own more than they have, and like the question is, how am I going to do it? And if the answer isn't like, hey, just make more cool stuff, it usually ends up being some answer that's horrific for productivity. I don't know. I would love the answer to be like, yeah, they just get like infinity free robots, but like
no. And I think like an ambitious guy with a robot beats a lazy guy with a robot, 10 days out of 10. So
yeah, and he probably ends up in a favorable tax regime and not a bad. And like we all know which country that's going to be and which one it's not. And like, I don't know, you got to wave a lot of magic wands if you want that to happen.
Good lead in. So you said you didn't want to make any policy recommendations. You joked that to get this right, you have to, quote, do all of the things that matter and none of the things that don't. Bad news, though, we have we invoked the 25th Amendment. You somehow are now president of the United States of America. What do you do starting right now from where we are?
I can't just quit and go back to my day job. Like I'm like,
no,
yeah, okay, cool.
Like
I have duty. Yep, country
peso.
first. I got it. The mantle. You must inherit the mantle.
We've also gotten rid of the thing where you have to be born. Yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not even eligible. Come on. Okay, the laundry list. Let me like rattle off the laundry list, because the point of the essay was just like the scope of this problem is so much bigger than you think. Like the problem is enormous. It's like you're talking about 50 years, 30, 50 years of problem. Okay, the laundry list is like the laundry list is like, okay, first day one, you got to tell everyone what we're doing. It's like non-negotiables is happening. Like get with the program. Like, I don't know, here's roughly the goals. Here's what we're going to do. It's not like corporate mumbo jumbo. It's just like big bold headings. This is what we're happening. It's happening no matter what. Second, just to bite the bullet on it. Yeah, we probably do a bunch of tariffs. That just is what it is. It's helpful. It'll be helpful for now. Then continue. It's all the same time. All happen at the same time. Then we figure out, okay, we're going to build a bunch of domestic regional hubs around industry. Question is, do you reuse the current ones, or are they just too decayed and you need to start fresh? Given that this whole thing is probably not a full life appointment, I'm like, we're just starting fresh. Otherwise, it'll never happen. So like, you probably just start next door. I don't know. I don't even like. Maybe you can eminent domain some federal land from the states or something. Probably pretty terrible. You've got to be whatever. I'm doing it. So we're starting regional hubs around certain industries around America. How do we put people in them? We need leaders. We need executives. People who are not cronies and terrible at making stuff and owned by various interests. So I don't know. You just find some executives and tell them they've got new jobs who are good. Maybe I steal them from the tech sector because all my friends will tell me who's good and I trust them, but that's kind of crony-ish, so I don't know. What about like then you have to put people in, people have to be here to build stuff. So we probably have to have a new civil service exam situation. We probably make the SAT slightly harder, but we can even accept that for credit for like certain like management roles. But we also need non-management roles. So we have like some training and accreditation programs next to inside every regional hub. If you graduate from this and you pass this qualification at the end, you get a job for at least 4 years, like whatever, cool. Here's your labor thing. But the job might not be with one company, but just you can work in a factory, the factory, not the company. Okay, so now we've got regional hubs, we've got people running the companies, we've got some smart people who can like make sure nothing goes too crazy. We've got a whole bunch of labor. Obviously, we build like infinity housing next to this, and it's like free if you're working here, basically, or something like that. Okay, so we're building stuff. We probably use the Department of Defense and a few other government agencies, to your point earlier, on electric batteries to kickstart procurement from these factories, because it's always nice to have pre-purchased inventory, pre-purchased orders. So we prove there's demand for stuff. You spoke about the ports earlier. We've got to ship this stuff out, right? So, okay, so cool. Now we could build some infrastructure. The train people will be happy. Probably a bunch of these will need like modern trains to get people from their houses to the hub and then to the ports or wherever else. We got to get the goods out there. We get to the ports. The longshoremen tell me I can't do anything, so we like just evaporate that whole arrangement. Like, I'm waving the magic wand here. Okay, you told me I could, so that's just gone. I could do whatever I like. And then, okay, so the goods are going. Now we've got people making stuff. There's like a career path to people. We probably need to fund trade publications and paper of record to make it like have social status and not just be some like terrible like Conrad's pet project of cronyism, and it's going to be a Stalin 5-year plan misery type thing. So everyone's going to think it's really cool, or like this is that, not just really cool, but like there has to be broad-based buy-in that this is worth doing, that it's meaningful, that dedicating yourself and like your career and like building an identity around like working, building stuff is good. So like, I'm not saying like it's a bunch of propaganda, but like someone needs to be writing this. And like, if that doesn't happen, the default is that every newspaper is going to be calling for like regime change by week 3. So like, I've got to have some supporters out there. Then we've got the goods, and they're in the ports. They're going to China. There's a question of like IP, because we spoke about this with BMW. Like, what do you do about the IP situation? I don't know, but I don't have time to figure it out because I'm not here for very long in this role. So I probably just say, if you build things in China or you use designs or share with China, you are treated the same way as as if you don't enforce a copyright on a copyright, which is to say, I don't think you care about your IP, so we don't care about it either. Anyone can make it in one of our industrial hubs. That's fine. Like, you don't care about it, cool. so we don't care about it.
I like that plan.
So now we've got a system up and running. But what happens if someone does something? Crime and enforcement. Okay, so if someone doesn't respect the IP, we get some industrial espionage or whatever they're just doing anyway. So like, yeah, like the reality is these zones have to be like radically different crime profile to Europe and America's default right now, which is different in both countries, but not conducive to building things. So we probably need to do massive judicial justice reform. We need to build new prisons because America's prison system is horrifically bad. Like, just get the Norway nice things, but then they're gonna be more full. So everyone's gonna be unhappy with that. And then, okay, so we've got the system. It's up and running. We're making goods in hubs. We probably need to reinvest capital. So we start some ministry of like trade and industry for like government debt reinvestment in companies that are doing well to help them scale out, but that's not quite venture capital because it's a different profile. Talking about making long-term investments,
like DOE loans type stuff.
Yeah, but like we can put real capital into businesses that are working, and we have to put constraints on this. So basically, we hire people out of MBA programs or something like that. We probably fund our own MBA programs in universities that are attached to these regional hubs. And we hire people out of this, and they get like guaranteed very high standard of living for this thing. However, they are banned from working in industry ever. The only way you can make money is by working for us, or whatever. Like you can't. The revolving door thing isn't going to work. And so, yeah, and we make that into a prestigious thing, right? Like Singapore does some kind of prestigious government programs integrated with that work. Like it's not doesn't have this veneer of sort of failed Soviet Stalinist terribleness. So we do that, and that's how we continue to fund the thing after like it's got kickstarted, is, and that's how we allocate capital towards winners and losers instead of doing cronyism. We just take like a bunch of smart people. Hey, what's working, what's not? You're basically DRI for your hub, and you, or maybe your industry within your hub, and make it happen or not. Kind of combative, kind of cooperative. Okay, so we've fixed crime, we fixed capital allocation, we fixed trade. We've kind of assumed we've fixed industry. We built the whole thing. I don't know how we fund it. Like we probably have to print a lot of capital and then and print a lot of dollars. But we've already done that, so maybe we could at least do it for something productive. That'd be nice. Yeah, I don't know. At what point in this chain do I get assassinated? Is my question. Like I think like step 2, but maybe I make it to like month.
You put tariffs pretty early, so like maybe maybe there. But
yeah, it's
dizzying, right? And like to your point, it's a X number of your commitment when like to even get the regional hubs built, you're already out of office.
Oh, I don't
so
make it to midterms. Yeah, like I'm voted out of office at year 2. The question is, do I get assassinated before then or not? Like, it's just like, and of course, we're assuming that there's no, like, I've packed the Supreme Court, right? Like, no one's blocking me on any of this stuff, right? Like, I mean, you're assuming the whole country doesn't hate me for throwing out all of it. Just nothing works. Like, I'm obviously not advocating this. This is why I made the joke. I'm like, I have no policy to advocate.
It's tough. I mean, like to your point on not making the principles for prosperity trade off. Like there is something to like, or you just like maybe cut some regulations and like make it easier for this like weird entrepreneurial system that somehow continues to work, that produced Tesla, to your point, it produced Tesla because we had one crazy man who just went all in where the capital markets wouldn't. But like maybe you just like try to figure out how to make that system work as well as humanly possible and hope that we kind of figure it out.
We have certain principles in the West that are not well aligned with like massively centralized state emperor who like dictates the economy by fiat. Like it's like you kind of lay out the laundry list and you're just like, this is like shockingly un-American, un-English. Like this is like nothing that I believe in. This like doesn't really work. As in like, I think it would work as in some world where all of the principles weren't violated and the culture and the country and everyone didn't explode. Like look at China, it works.
We better hope that we love your particular flavor of ideas.
Oh,
this,
it's
like,
we're
putting a lot of eggs in one Conrad basket.
You need like broad. I do think like part of, to your point on like, what if we just did a little bit, like a little bit of broad alignment on some of the underlying principles would go a long way, as in like making people domestically a little rich. Like I think in some ways, like on a meta level, I kind of write my essay and other ones too. It kind of like is like a plea to my fellow elites of like, okay, the concerns of labor in the labor capital dispute, like you can ignore them, they will obliterate you if you do, but also you can't put them primary to capital because then capital will leave. Like you need to thread the needle on that balance. And a lot of my writing is just trying to like put the language that we use instead of the polemic language that people usually talk about these things in, and be like, look, like you could do stuff and
this is what we're dealing with.
You could do stuff and it could work, and like maybe we should try.
Amen. All right, so last 3, I think people will after listening to this. If people want to read another essay of yours, what should they read?
If you like the economic stuff, read The Full Stack of Society, which is my like magnum opus on how countries build wealth. If you like the culture stuff, read Escalation Theory. It's about crime and how elites caused all the crime in the world. And if you like tech, read Monetization Monopolies, because it's about how tech companies work.
Pro-monopolies, or anti-union pro-monopolies,
oh, yeah.
I think is your stance. I just need to figure out what I'm going to put on the headline of the piece. But
something like that.
Don't
get me in trouble.
What's one essay that you didn't write that other people should read?
Everybody who cares about these things that we've been talking about should read Alexander Hamilton's original report on manufacturers with the footnotes that I've linked in a number of my essays, and that you can find online by Googling exactly what I just said. And I have one piece of reading advice for it, which is reading old-timey English is very hard for modern Americans because they respect punctuation, and it'll take you 10 minutes of practice once you're reading it. Ignore all punctuation marks while reading. Read it as a stream of consciousness. Read it as this conversation. Read it as you and me having a podcast. Have ChatGPT read it back to you or something. Read all the footnotes, and it will do 2 things to you. One, it will slightly lower your respect for what we've been talking about China today, because you'll be like, holy smokes, this guy in the 1700s laid it all out here, right? He's talking about debt, he's talking about capital allocation, he's talking about cost of labor. And then you'll also develop some respect for the people that built the institutions of America and what we have and what we had today. And I think it's worth reading.
You've seen the charts on literacy kind of declining. Would it be okay if people just watched Hamilton?
Sure. Yeah. Just watch the play. You'll get all the it's the Cliff Notes version. Just watch it.
Or at least, throw the soundtrack on Spotify. It's like really catchy.
It's really good. I've seen it. It was wonderful. I was hesitant to see it because I'm a fan of him, so I was just like, oh no. And, against myself, I very much enjoyed it. So yeah, you just watch the play. You don't have to read the report.
Perfect. You may have just said it with the threading the needle, but the last question I always ask is, I gave you even more power. Not only are you president now, but you have the ability to implant a one sentence takeaway in everybody's brain. What is that one sentence?
The only piece I would add to what we were just talking about is how to put it in one sentence. Winning is in the space of possible outcomes, but it is not the default outcome. And so you need to thread that needle.
That's really good. Conrad, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for writing. I cannot wait for 6 to 12 months from now to read the next piece of yours, and I'll have you back on then.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.